Hey there, scholars. This is Mrs. Bowers. I'm coming to you from Troy, New York, and I am so excited to be starting this YouTube channel for you and your families. I've had a lot of parents call me and text me, Mrs. Bowers, not really sure how to do this math. This isn't how I learned this. Could you help me out? So I thought, well, why don't I make a YouTube channel? That way, all my parents and all my scholars can get a little refresher to help while at home. So today we are going to be looking over adding and subtracting fractions, and then taking the next step by taking that sum or difference and taking that fraction and putting it into its simplest form. So of course, we always have to mention our standard that we're working with. So we're working with 5 and FA1. What that means to you in common language is we are going to add and subtract some fractions and use some strategies to take those fractions and put them into their simplest form. So a few steps that our fifth grade scholars have been starting with is the first place you need to look is in the denominator. We know from third grade that the denominator is the bottom number in the fraction or the whole piece of the fraction. So the first step when we're adding and subtracting fractions is let's check out the denominators. Are the denominators the same or are they different? So your first step is to ask, are there different denominators? If the answer is no, then you're just going to add or subtract as always. But if you're noticing that, yes, these denominators are different, the first step is you need to find the LCM, which is the least common multiple. And my scholars know that in order to do this, you need to skip count. Now we know that skip counting is just repeated addition. So we're going to use these denominators and we're going to jot down all the multiples of 12 and of 3. I like to just jot it down over here in the white margin. I'm just going to list all my multiples of 12 and all my multiples of 3. So I'm going to skip count with what I know: 12, 24, 36, 48, and so on. I just have them do just a couple, maybe 4 or 5 just to start off with. And then I'm going to do skip counting by threes. 3, 6, 9, 12. At this point, my scholars would all start shouting, stop, stop. And I'd say, why? Why do we need to stop? And they would tell us because we found our LCM, meaning what multiple do we see in both of these lists that have the same number in common? Now, if you were to continue on with these lists, you know that you would also come across 24 and 36, but those are just multiples that are in common. We're looking for the lowest number that they have in common, which is 12. After we have found the LCM, the next step is to make an equivalent fraction. What does that mean, Mrs. Bowers? Well, let me tell you what it means. It means we're going to rewrite these fractions so that they are equivalent and they have a common denominator. That common denominator is going to be our LCM, which is 12. So when I rewrite 5/12 with the LCM as my denominator, I'm going to ask, okay, Mrs. Bowers, how did I get from 12 to 12? I multiplied by 1. And my students know, whatever you multiply with the denominator, you have to multiply with the numerator. So 12 times 1 is 12. 5 times 1 is 5. Oh, there wasn't much change. It's still 5/12. But then I'm going to take my other fraction, 1/3, and I'm going to rewrite this fraction with my LCM, 12, as my denominator. And I'm going to do the same thinking work. How did I get from 3 to 12? I know that 3 times 4 is 12. Whatever you do to the numerator, you have to do to the denominator. Oh, I'm sorry, flip that. Whatever you do to the denominator, you do to the numerator. So in the denominator, we multiplied by 4. So 3 times 4 is 12. 1 times 4 is 4. Let's go back to my original checklist. I found the LCM by skip counting. I just made equivalent fractions. Yes, that's tough work, guys. And last but not least, now we can finally add our fractions because the denominators are now the same. So it's going to make adding really, really easy. So here I go. 5/12 plus 4/12. You should know from 3rd and 4th grade when you add fractions and the denominators are the same, the sum of the fractions, the denominator will still be the same. And now we just need to add the numerators. Oh, we know from 1st and 2nd grade and even kindergarten that 5 plus 4 is 9. Ladies and gents, 9/12 is your final answer. My kids love to remind me, Mrs. Bowers, don't forget to box your final answer. Absolutely. We did this work last week, but today we added another step to this work, another layer. I challenged my scholars to take our final answer, or in this case, our sum, because when you add, it's a sum. Now we need to take this fraction and turn it into its simplest form. Oh, geez, Mrs. Bowers, I forgot how you do that. Don't worry, let me show you how. Okay, simplest form, you ask? Well, darlings, it takes 3 steps to put a fraction into its simplest form. First, you need to list all the factors of the numerator and the denominator. Then you need to find the greatest factor between those two numbers. And then you're going to divide your numerator and denominator by the greatest factor. Mrs. Bowers, that's a lot of mumbo jumbo. Can you show me what you mean? Oh, of course, I'd love to. The previous problem that we just did together, the sum was 9/12. That was our final answer. But I need to put this into simplest form. I don't know if it's in its simplest form yet or not, but here's what I'm going to do. My first step is I'm going to list all the factors of the numerator and the denominator. So I'm going to list all the factors of 9 and all the factors of 12. I like to just do a nice quick list. I always start with 1 and I work my way up. So I know that 1 times 9 is 9. 2 times, no, that doesn't work. 3, oh yes, 3 times 3 is 9. And that's about all the factors that 9 has. And then 12, I'll list all my factors of 12. I really hope that you guys can see this. If not, I'm sorry. All right, so all my factors of 12. I'll start with 1. I know 1 times 12 is 12. I know 2 times 6 is 12. I know 3 times 4 is 12. And that's all the factors for 12. My next step, I'm going to use a highlighter. Okay, I'm going to go between all the factors of 9 and 12, and I'm going to see what numbers do they have in common. So I know that there's a 1 and a 1 in both of my lists of factors. I don't see a 2 in both of these lists. I do see a 3 in both of these lists. I don't see a 4 on both sides. I don't see a 6 on both sides. I don't see a 12 on both sides. I don't see a 9 on both sides. So factors that they have in common are 1 and 3. But I want to use the greatest factor because I want this fraction to be in its simplest form. So my greatest factor is 3. Beautiful. Now that I found my greatest factor between the numerator and the denominator, next I'm going to divide my numerator and denominator by the greatest factor. So I'm going to rewrite this right here for you so I have more room. 9/12. I'm going to divide by 3 because 3 was the greatest factor. Whatever I divide with my numerator, I have to divide with my denominator. 9 divided by 3, we know is 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So, ladies and gentlemen, 9/12 in its simplest form is 3/4. Of course, box that final answer. that's all for today. I really hope that this was helpful, and we're going to continue posting videos, maybe about every day or every other day, just to keep my parents and my scholars, just refreshing them and reminding them of the skills that we learned during the day. All right, guys, until next time, have a good night.